Hello. Hello, friends. I just got back from Scotland and, yes, I am jet lagged. But wow, it was a wonderful trip. And if you've ever considered going to Scotland, I would recommend it. Absolutely. At least to the places I visited, which included Edinburgh and some of the Highlands like the Isle of Skye, Glencoe, a castle, I think it was Dunvegan Castle, Portree, around there. Oh yes, went to Fort William, did the Jacobite train, ferry to the Isle of Skye, Portree, Loch Ness, saw some cows, saw some sheep. It was great. But I also learned that Scotland has so many unique things about it. Not just from like North America, but just from the rest of the world too. But also primarily North America. Because Scotland has some similarities with, the UK. I'm not the UK, it's in the UK, with Europe. And of course, it's really similar to England in a lot of aspects, using the same currency, pounds and stuff. But hey, the accents are different. But yeah, I just thought you should know about the wild things that I learned about Scotland. So, one of them is that there are more sheep than people in Scotland. Isn't that wild? Which probably explains why Dolly came from Scotland. Now, for those of you who don't know, Dolly is the first ever mammal to be cloned using an adult cell. Dolly's a sheep. So, yeah. And I think Dolly was also named after the singer, Dolly Parton. Yes, I checked. Dolly was named after the singer, Dolly Parton. And yeah, it's pretty wild that Dolly came from there because she's kind of a big deal. And I think I only learned this because I was in the gift shop and I saw so many like Dolly gifts and I was like, oh, I guess Dolly originated here. And then I googled it, of course. But yeah, I thought that was pretty wild. The other thing I thought was wild is that there are so many things that were invented in Scotland. I feel like people think, oh, Scotland, it's a small little country, like what could possibly be made there? Everything. Literally so much is invented there. It's wild. I have a little list, checked it twice, of just a few things that have been invented there. Of course, one is the cloning thing that I already brought up, but also refrigerator was invented in Scotland. What? It's already cold there. Why do they need it? But seriously, that's pretty crazy because who doesn't have a fridge in their place now? Like everyone has a fridge. Unless you're, a student in a dorm. I feel for you. Penicillin, very important. Penicillin was invented by Alexander Fleming, and that discovery led to the introduction of antibiotics. So, bada bing, bada boom. Also, contact lenses are also invented in Scotland. Thank you, Scotland, because I am wearing contacts as we speak. So that's pretty cool. And golf was invented in Scotland. So if you like that sport, then you can, again, thank this country. So it's pretty crazy. There's definitely a lot more stuff. If you're interested, feel free to Google it because there's a whole list of things, but I just thought that was crazy. Things that we play or use every day were invented there. There is one particular thing I learned about Scotland that has to be the most wild thing I learned. And I think I'm just gonna have to tell you because I can't keep it in any longer. It's just, I was shook about it. But basically, Scotland was the first country in the world to offer free feminine hygiene products. Like pads, tampons. It's all free. It's free. And this sounds like something that probably should have already be like in all the other parts of the world, but no, it's not. It totally should be free around the world. So listen up, North America, Europe, everywhere else. Make period products free. That would be great. Thank you. But seriously, I thought that was crazy. And I found that out because I would like see signage about it while I was in Scotland. And yeah, you bet, in every bathroom there was just a basket there of stuff for you to take to, and not charging you like $1 or whatever it is now in other places. So thank you, Scotland. I'm so glad you started that. That's amazing. And it's wild that that's wild, I think. But I digress. Some other things that make Scotland kind of unique and different is tipping. Tipping is like not really a thing there. I know this is kind of like in Europe too, but I feel like in Europe the expectations about tipping in certain areas are changing. Like it's kind of like, oh, now it's kind of like tip 10%, or like maybe they'll still have a little like to tip thing. I would say majority of the time while I was in Scotland, it didn't even have an option to add a tip, which is like a little bit of a culture shock because I feel like in North America, everywhere asks you to tip, like everywhere. 7-Eleven, you want to tip me, bro? Like legit. You just grab a coffee, a quick to-go coffee from anywhere even. Burger King, tip me, bro. Like it's wild. Tipping has gone crazy. So it's kind of a relief to go to Scotland and just not have that expected. It just like takes a little bit of a weight off your back. There were a couple places where like a service charge was already added, but that was super rare. And it was still optional, although let's be honest, if you're gonna add a service charge, am I gonna be someone that says, hey, take that off the bill? Like that's kind of awkward. So but yeah, like I just found that super fascinating and fun, and I'm sure a big part of it is because they pay people higher wages there than in other places, so tips aren't as needed. However, Scotland's prices, I will admit, are a little rough. Like they are kind of high. The only thing that I would say is really cheap is beer and wine, which is like the opposite of Canada, by the way. But yeah, that was another thing on my list. Beer and wine is very cheap, so very easy to get drunk if that's your vibe. And that's also pretty similar in Europe though. Like Germany, you can find really cheap beer too. So but Scotland is technically more known for its whiskey, so, and cider. In general, the UK and cider are like this, you know? So you can find yourself in the trap of still not getting cheap beer because you gotta get that good whiskey. Because whiskey is so expensive. I was like, oh my goodness. What a lot of people were saying is how they describe Scotland is to England as Canada is to the US. They're both north, cold, and 10% of the population. I'm sure there's a joke in there somewhere too, but I found that really funny because that is pretty true. Another thing that is unique, and this is more of a UK thing I would say versus just Scotland, But healthcare is like 100% free, which is wild because it's not just free for like people who live there, it's free for anyone who visits. So I met a girl on this trip who, the day after she arrived, she like rolled her ankle, which sucked, but I guess it was really bad. She needed to go to the hospital, and she was American, and she didn't have to pay a single cent for the hospital visit, for the crutches, for anything. And I was like shook because, okay, let's compare it. Of course, in the US, you gotta pay, and if you don't have insurance. In Canada, if you don't live there, if you're not a resident, you gotta pay anyways. Residents get it included and citizens get it included, but not foreigners and not tourists. The UK, you can be anything. You could be a cat. Well, actually, I don't know about veterinary care. I probably should look into that. But you could be any kind of human and get service in for free, which I thought was so cool. Because in Europe, I know there's also universal healthcare there too. I think you still need to pay at least a little something. It's still cheap and affordable and all that, but like there's usually some copay or something. Whereas like my friend said that like, yeah, she went there and she didn't have to pay anything, which was wild. And yes, she was someone I met who then became my friend. That's why I called her a friend. So I like to make friends while I travel. Walkability. Okay, this is definitely something different from North America. It is just so walkable. So walkable. Like, you don't need a car to get around most of the areas, and sure, some parts you might want to like take a tram or a bus, but like you don't really need to, especially if you don't mind walking up hills, because Edinburgh is on a hill, so that part might be a little rough. It's not as handicap accessible, but like it's pretty cool to just walk around and, I don't know, not feel worried about getting run over. That's fun. And other things that are different, well, they drive on the other side of the road. Wheels are also on the right side of the car, so that's pretty weird. That's why I'm not about to drive in Scotland. I did drive when I went to New Zealand. They're also on the other side of the road, but it was a little uncomfortable. So after the New Zealand driving, I kind of was like, alright, I don't really want to drive on the other side of the road unless I have to. And luckily, I didn't need to for the Highlands tour, which, by the way, of course, if you're going to the Highlands, you need to drive. The walkability was focused on staying in the city, but I did an organized tour for the Highlands, so I did not have to drive. I took went on a bus that took us everywhere, so that was cool. Oh, another interesting fun fact. Taxes are included in the price of things you buy. So what you're paying for is actually what you're paying for. And again, this concept sounds like it should be a no-brainer and done in other places, but it's not done everywhere. I think this is more that the taxes and the price are probably in some other countries, but not in North America. And it's really nice to already have the taxes included in the price, I have to say. Like, no surprises, you know? Scotland has a lot of fun little sweets and treats. I brought these back. They're called Canucks tea cakes. And they are a delicious biscuit base topped with marshmallow and covered with real milk chocolate. I accidentally squished one just now. Oops. Let me show you how it's supposed to look. This. Okay, you probably want to see it. Ta-da. Ooh. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty much what it tastes. It's gooey and fluffy and inviting. Now, the only thing I'll say about Scotland that's negative is that their desserts, there's a lot of desserts and a lot of food that's very unhealthy. Like, I think most of their food is pretty unhealthy. Like, you have to actively go out of your way to find healthy food. I mean, if you think about it, they have haggis. I don't think that's healthy. That's cheap stuff. Then they have all these desserts. And then, here's another thing. They're obsessed with deep fried foods. And I'm not talking just about fish and chips, y'all. I'm talking about, they have a famous thing they deep fry. It's a deep fried Mars bar. The candy bar. And I tried it. And it was pretty decent. But it was very heavy. So just keep that in mind for when you try it. And I recommend getting it with ice cream because having it by itself is just, you need to dilute it. So of course I dilute it with more sugar. Another fun fact that I learned about Scotland is that lakes there are called lochs, like L-O-C-H-S, lochs, which totally explains to me now about the Loch Ness monster. Because really it just means Lake Ness monster. Because we visited Loch Ness and I was like, what? I thought that was just a monster. No, the monster is named after the lake. The lake is named Ness. It's all coming together now, friends. It's all coming together. So yeah, and that's why the monster's name is really Nessie, because Lake Ness. Which, by the way, the Loch Ness monster isn't actually real. But the Loch Ness is, I think, the biggest, that's definitely the biggest lake in Scotland. It's the biggest in the world. I don't know, but it's deep. It is so deep that you can have a cruise ship run over it, no problem. So, yeah, you basically, people don't go swimming in it. It's too cold and too deep and intense. But yeah, I saw a bunch of lochs there and I was like, oh, this makes sense now why that's called Loch this, Loch that, Loch this. They're lakes. Okay, one more thing to say about Scotland's differentness is the language. They do primarily speak English there, but there's also the ancient language Gaelic, which I read people still speak there. So that's pretty cool, and I feel like I heard it around at some point because Gaelic sounds very unique. And if you're a deaf person, then there isn't Scottish Sign Language, but there's British Sign Language, and that is used in Scotland and in England. So, just kind of an extra fun fact, because there are different sign languages around the world. Like British Sign Language is different than American Sign Language. American Sign Language is used both in the US and Canada. So another reason how Scotland is to England as Canada is to the US. I also brought back from my trip a map of Edinburgh. Just to give you a little perspective, there's so much to do in this city and it's so much fun. I'm trying to see if I can find the castle on here. You would think that would be obviously on here, and yet I can't spot it because the castle is like the biggest attraction in Edinburgh, and it actually is really cool. Would recommend. Oh, here it is. You can kind of see it right there. So yeah, it is very high on the hill, and it's next to a famous street called the Royal Mile, which is also filled with tons of shops and food and other paid experiences. This side. Oh, here you even have a little map of the castle. A little more into it. I didn't have time to go to Glasgow on this trip, but maybe in the future. And another thing that people I feel like don't really talk about in Edinburgh is the waterfront. Now this is in a separate area called Leith, but that's still a part of Edinburgh greater area. But I just thought, whoa, it's so cool that they have like a little beach and port, but like there was no one there when I went. And I went in the summer, friends. So, here's the kind of the waterfront area. And I was just surprised because I feel like usually when there's water, there's tons of like touristy things to do around it. So maybe in the future that will get really renovated, because I saw a lot of construction happening. And they did recently build a distillery there, which is really beautiful and nice. I got a hot toddy in it. I like hot toddies. But yeah, it's just, it kind of seems like the Edinburgh area is still growing, which is kind of neat. So yeah, those are a few wild things I learned about while in Scotland. But I do have to say, overall, I had an amazing time, and the people there are so nice. And a lot of people I feel like want to move to Scotland, because I met a lot of also non-Scottish people that moved there from like, especially from like the other parts of UK, because that's easier access. But in general, like, must be those free period products. But anyways, I hope that you have a relaxing day and flutters away. Ciao for now.